Welcome back to Taylor by Nature, where I discuss topics pertaining to nature, which is our nurturing environment. As customary, I will begin with a Bible verse, which today is taken from Daniel 6, verse 16, which reads, So the king gave the command, and they brought Daniel and cast him into a den of lions. But the king spoke, saying to Daniel, Your God, whom you serve continuously, will deliver you. Most English speakers will interpret this verse literally without any consideration to translate it back to its original context, which has nothing to do with real lions, but Elions, which today is spelled with an E, that have the same characteristic of a mammal lion that kills the offspring of a lioness in order to get her to carry his own offspring, which Genesis 3, verse 15 clearly addresses as the enmity between the two offspring, which translate to replacement of Adam's offspring with that of the woman, also known as the serpent or angel. Today's topic of discussion pertains to Dr. Stephen Gear, who recently interviewed on the PBD podcast, where he discussed an array of topics surrounding disclosure of so-called classified information pertaining to other human technologies and life forms, which by virtue of acquisition is almost impossible to fully disclose because the attainment of such acquisition were not virtuous, as usual. In regard to disclosure, we have to consider the past and how language, like the ancient Aramaic, functioned to fully comprehend our present and plan for our future, especially when it comes to prophetic scriptural writings. For example, a majority of us see stories in the so-called Bible and ignorantly think they only pertain to the past as we have been told, when in fact the language that the original scriptures were penned in mirrored nature or natural laws. This means it creates image of itself by mirroring function in nature. So in essence, its stories represent the past, present, and future because nature does not change, only adheres to our action within cycles that are tied to predetermined outcomes that can't be prayed away or be forgiven for. Once you do something, it come back to you. Today we refer to that as karma. Unfortunately, this understanding is lacking due to our language change to so-called English, which is why the language was changed, because the English language was literally hides the truth or obscure the truth and tell half the story. In fact, Dr. Greer disclosure project has already been disclosed throughout the Bible. But due to the veil effect of the so-called English language, we are unable to perceive such evidence. For example, the first book within their English translated Bible would be considered the first disclosure, in my humble opinion, because Genesis is the informal plural for genes. That is a unit of heredity that is transferred from a parent to offspring and is held to determine some characteristic of the offspring. But surely this critical information has been looked over and misinterpreted for centuries on purpose. Genesis 3, verse 15, like I said, reemphasized this point as stated above. We also see disclosure in other verses like Ezekiel 10, verse 10, which reads, And as for their appearance, They four had one likeness, as if a wheel had been in the midst of a wheel. This is literally the description of Terrence Howard linchpin technology that everyone seemed to be ignoring on purpose because the so-called English language has hidden this knowledge for years. Also, 2 Kings 2:15-16 also reads, the company of the prophet from Jericho who were watching said, perhaps the Spirit of the Lord, which translate to Ruach, has picked him up and set him down on some mountain or some valley. As you can see, they are actually describing a event that took place. Also, Ezekiel 1 verse 1 reads, then the Spirit, which translates to Ruach, lift me up and brought me to the gate of the house of the Lord that faces east. And lastly, Ezekiel 3:12-14 reads, the Spirit of the Ruach lift me up, and I heard behind me a loud rumbling sound as the glory of the Lord, the Kavod, rose from the place where it was standing. The Spirit of Ruach left me up and took me away. All these encounters sound very similar to UAPs or UFOs in which we are experiencing today. So the overall presentation of this information is that this information is not new. It's just new to us in the English language. When you consider the first language, which was nature-based, which described a reality in its true essence, then we move from that, like the Aramaic, we move from that to the Greek, then we move from that to Old English, and now we're in modern English. As you can see, as we move throughout the centuries, what is happening is that when language was initially used to describe reality, now that function of language have changed. Now language is being used to create reality. So no longer is it describing reality, now it's creating reality. And by, like I say, it's kind of a synthetic language. And by its ability to create reality, you also could create different ideologies, which, and pretty much creating a whole different concept than what is intended for. We live in a duality world, and it's right, left, up, down, reality versus ideology. And right now we are fighting an ideological war, which information being presented to us, which doesn't reflect our true nature. It doesn't reflect our physical world, and it opposes our natural form and function. So that's what we're dealing with today. I hope this presentation was enlightening to you, and hope to speak with you guys again. Thanks.